by correcting you. Wow, I'll say that again. Be thankful when someone compliments you by correcting you. Do you have the humility to hear? Doesn't mean you have to do it, but do you have the humility to hear? Paragraph number 28, he says it this way. Ineffable is the union of man and God in every act of the soul. The simplest person who is in integrity worships God becomes God. Yet, forever and ever, the influx of this better and universal self is new and unsearchable. Ever it inspires awe and astonishment. How dear, how soothing to man aspires the idea of God, peopling the lonely place, affecting the scars of our mistakes and disappointments. When we have broken our God of tradition and ceased from our God of rhetoric, then may God fire the heart with his presence. It is the doubling of the heart itself, nay, the infinite enlargement of the heart with a power of growth to a new infinity on every side. It inspires in man an ineffable trust. The idea here is that we can move from the religious to the spiritual, as he will make the observation. And then finally he will finish it by saying it this way. The heart in thee is the heart of all. Not a valve, not a wall, not an intersection is there anywhere in nature, but one blood rolls uninterruptedly in endless circulation through all men, as the water of the globe is all one sea, and truly seen, its tide is one. You're one drop in an ocean of drops. You and Earthy's tree are both energy. We're somehow all connected, Emerson says. And once you gain that insight, you cannot look at other people but with an eye of respect. Even the ones that you don't like. Even the ones who are benighted. Remember, we said it when we studied Cave Allegory, Book 7 of Republic. That great teacher Christ on the cross. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Not forgive them because they're nasty, no. They're stupid. When people treat you poorly, to have the capacity to recognize, I'm sorry for you that you don't understand, that we're all in this thing together. And there really isn't any difference between any of us. So I know about Thrasymachus and you don't. Who cares? What matters is that we all have this appreciation. And in this moment, obviously, we then have a certain kind of power, right, as we're working through this one. Think of it this way. We can move from that egocentric, the world is all about me, to that ethnocentric, I do what my tribe or my family or my nation thinks is most important, to finally a world-centric view. That is to say, we can begin to consider other views, other ideas. And in that moment, we don't have to agree with someone, but we can certainly respect that someone. Think about how our political discourse would be so much more healthy if we could somehow understand this idea. I can disagree with you, and you can disagree with me, and we can still somehow appreciate the positions that we share. Paragraph 29, let men then learn the revelation of all nature and all thought to his heart. This, namely, the highest dwells with him, that the sources of nature are in his own mind. If the sentiment of duty is there, we think of duty with Immanuel Kant. But if he would know what the great God speaketh, he must go into his closet and shut the door, as Jesus said. God will not make himself manifest to cowards. It's a great line, often quoted. God will not make himself manifest to cowards. He must greatly listen to himself, withdrawing himself from all the accents of other men's devotion. Their prayers even are hurtful to him until he have made his own. In other words, we have to listen to ourselves. We have to spend time alone. This is, of course, the importance of meditation, isn't it? The ability to be able to spend time alone. This is why students love to go for walks alone, to spend time alone, to try and understand, what do I really think about these ideas right now? Paragraph number 30, it makes no difference whether the appeal is to numbers or to one. The faith that stands on authority is not faith. The reliance on authority measures the decline of religion, the withdrawal of the soul. The position man hath given to Jesus now for many centuries of history is a position of authority. It characterizes themselves. It cannot alter the eternal facts. Great is the soul and plain. It is no flatterer. It is no follower. It never appeals from itself. Again, more radical theological views, religious views. For Emerson, the idea here being, in other words, one must begin with this idea that we're all somehow connected through this oversoul. The soul, he says in paragraph 30, gives its self alone, original, and pure. And in our final paragraph, he says, to the lonely, original, and pure, who on that condition gladly inhabits, leads, and speaks through it. Then is it glad, young, and nimble. It's not wise, but it sees through all things. It's not called religious, but it is innocent. He doesn't use the word spiritual, he just uses the word innocent. It calls the light its own, and feels that the grass grows, and the stone falls by a law inferior to and dependent on its nature. Behold, it saith, I am born into the great, the universal mind. I, the imperfect, adore my own perfect. And there it is. I, the imperfect, box 1, adore the perfect, box 2. You can kind of see where he's headed, right? He says, I am somehow receptive of the great soul, and therefore I do overlook the sun and the stars and feel them to be but the fair accidents and effects which change and pass. One way to say this is, Emerson has almost two views of nature. Nature with a small n. By the way, this is the answer to that whole notion of tree huggers and all of that kind of stuff. Nature with a small n is here. That's just Ruthie's tree. It's nature with a capital N that Emerson is going to always be talking about, right? What makes that nature so significant, right? He says it this way. I am somehow receptive of that great soul, and therefore I overlook the sun and stars and feel them to be but the fair accidents and effects which change and pass. More and more, the surges of everlasting nature enter into me, and I become public and human in my regards and actions. So, he says, come I to live in thoughts and act with energies which are immortal. Thus, revering the soul and learning, as the ancients say, that, quote, its beauty is immense, end quote. We think of beauty as truth, truth, beauty. Man will come to see the world as the perennial miracle which the soul worketh, and be less astonished at particular wonders. He will learn that there is no profane history, that all history is sacred, that the universe is represented in an atom in a moment of time. He will weave no longer a spotted life of shreds and patches, we think of our Hamlet, but he will live with divine unity. He will cease from what is base and frivolous in his own life, and will be content with all places and any service he can render. He will calmly front the morrow in the negligency of that trust which carries God with it, and so hath already the whole future in the bottom of the heart. It's significant that the essay ends with the word heart. What do you want to make of that? It's kind of fascinating that that's where he goes. All right, that's the essay. Let's finish now with some observations at level 2A and 2B. Messages, themes, well, obviously our dualism here moves to a monism, right? Two sides of the same coin. In humility, again, not pride, we should trust ourselves, not our puny ego, but again, this idea of the oversoul, right? And finally, this idea that great art is simple, right? It uses the world of form to somehow help us understand the formless. Think of it this way. If your education has done anything for you, if your study of music, if your study of art, if your study of sport has done anything for you, it's to help you understand that beyond the form, there is something formless. There is the playing of music, and then there's the attempt to be a musician, right? That appreciation of the formless. At 2B in Rhetoric, well, obviously it's Emerson, so we're going to talk about his amazing word pictures, right? That evolution of metamorphosis. In other words, we don't move in our evolution from 1, 2, 3 in that way, but rather through some kind of gradual stages that aren't always so clear, right? That notion of are you in the cave, out of the cave, or somewhere being kind of moved from one to the other as we studied our Plato. Note the questions, very Socratic, right, that he loves to ask. Then notice all of his allusions, his references to other texts. Which one for you was your favorite? Finally, at 3A, let's relate this to other texts. Obviously, Plato's Apology comes to mind. The unexamined life is not worth living. We've mentioned the Phaedo and the immortality of the soul and the argument for the existence of soul. And then obviously, this notion of Book 6 and 7 from Republic comes to mind. How about this one? We studied Shakespeare. How about this one? Shakespeare is only great, Emerson will argue, if he shows you your world. Are Hamlet's questions your questions? Think about that. The questions that are raised for in the classic text? Are they your questions? Are Milton's questions your questions? Are Dante's questions your questions? When Virgil says to Dante, up on your feet, this is no time to tire, does that speak to you? And does it work for you? If it does, it's great literature. If it doesn't, it's a waste of your time. The best texts, of course, are simple. They've left you somehow stunned. Do you remember that final line of Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner? Coleridge and Emerson are pals. Remember, he goes as one who hath been stunned. He is of sense for a moment. But he wakes, right, the next morning, wiser and sadder. The identification with text. Why do you love the texts that move you? The books, the movies, the music, even the video games. I love to talk to gamers about why it is some games they play over and over again and other games they won't. Why? Because I like it. No. That's a child's answer. I want a mature answer. Why? The answer, of course, if you press long enough, if you're given this background information, ultimately a gamer will say, the reason I come back again and again and again to that game is because it somehow brings me more of this. It connects me in some way. I can't explain it, but when I'm playing that game, I lose myself, and time goes away. I am in this moment. That's what all great art does, right? Of course, we've asked it already. Why is sports, for so many of us, such a compelling part of that, right? Well, finally, at 3B, we can relate this to ourselves. We've asked this question, by the way, at 3A. What was wrong on the island? And Golding's Lord of Flies, what went wrong on the island? Emerson would give the answer that what was wrong on the island is that the young men had not been properly educated to understand that there was something beyond this. But that still raises the Jack question. And here now, as we get to 3B, we will ask that question. Does Jack realize that what he's doing on that island is in fact wrong? Or is Thrasymachus and Machiavelli right? That there is none of this internal voice and all that other kind of garbage, but rather there are some people that are just born evil. Is that true? See, we get to decide. Do you believe in this notion of oversoul? Do you believe in soul? Right? And is it true? You got to believe in mind to deny its existence. Descartes seemed to think so, the great French philosopher. Finally, how do you critique your own education thus far? Is it time for you to grow? Is it time for you to evolve? What kind of 40-year-old will you be to an 18-year-old? As we finish, and I'm about to then turn to the next essay that I'll talk with you guys about, an essay called Circles. Play this game with me really quickly on the paper in front of you. Draw a circle. Do it. I challenge you to do this. Draw a circle. Go ahead. And then I would suggest draw another one, and then draw one more, just to make sure that you know how to do it. But now I'm going to ask you, I want you to answer, where did you start all three of those circles? Like where? At what point? Did you start at the same point? Did you go clockwise or counterclockwise? That is to say, did you go left or right? Now I want to challenge you to try something a little different. Start somewhere different and go in the opposite direction. And please identify, you are drawing a circle. Then why does it feel so foreign? Because this is the nature of our education. We find ourselves working in a certain kind of way that we think is natural to us. And when we are challenged to recognize there are lots of ways to draw a circle, we will be ready to understand not only Emerson's Oversoul, but we'll be ready to study his classic text, Circles. Thank you. I'll see you in a bit.